Power is never handed to you, it's taken piece by piece under the illusion of virtue. Machiavelli knew that morality in politics is camouflage, a costume worn while pulling invisible strings. He watched smiles hide daggers in Florence's corridors and learned a truth every modern politician ignores. People don't follow truth, they follow the appearance of it. What did he teach that still terrifies leaders today? 5 lessons that reveal how power actually works. Power is never given, it is taken. Slowly, quietly, and often under the illusion of virtue. That's the first truth Machiavelli understood better than anyone else. The world doesn't reward those who wait patiently for fairness. It bends for those who understand how to make men believe in fairness while they pull the strings behind it. Every politician, every leader who steps into the arena, walks into a theater of illusion. Smiles are rehearsed, handshakes are calculated, and every promise is a test of who controls the frame of reality itself. What Machiavelli saw, and what most never dare to admit, is that morality in politics isn't a compass, it's camouflage. It's not there to guide decisions, it's there to hide the machinery behind them. People want to believe their leaders are noble, principled, compassionate, and the truly powerful. They give the people that illusion, while behind closed doors, they make the ruthless choices necessary to survive. A politician who confuses morality with strategy will always be eaten by one who knows the difference. Here's the thing, most people are not governed by truth, they are governed by perception. They don't want reality, they want reassurance. They don't want to know how power actually works, they want to feel safe under someone who seems to know. So the first lesson is brutal but liberating. Control perception and you control reality. Machiavelli wrote it plainly. A prince must learn to be both the fox and the lion to frighten the wolves, the fox to recognize traps. The politician who masters both survives any storm. But most leaders today, they try to be saints in a world built for predators. They promise transparency, honesty, purity, words that sound good in speeches but are fatal in practice. Because here's the paradox. To lead people honestly, you must first understand their dishonesty. To protect truth, you must learn to speak the language of lies. Look around. The most beloved figures in history were not the purest. They were the most skillful at blending image and action. They projected virtue while wielding cunning. They smiled while they maneuvered. And their enemies, who underestimated them because they mistook charm for weakness, disappeared from history's pages. Machiavelli wasn't teaching cruelty. He was teaching survival in a world that feeds on naivety. Imagine the palace corridors of Florence, whispers, daggers, betrayals hidden beneath polite laughter. Machiavelli watched it all, studied it, dissected it. And what he learned is the eternal law of politics. Power belongs not to the good, but to the good actor. The leader who performs virtue convincingly enough to be trusted, while remaining ruthless enough to act when no one's watching, wins. Always. Because the crowd judges by what they see, not what is. And the wise politician crafts both the act and the outcome. That's the second lesson. Appearances matter more than intention. Intentions live in the mind, invisible, abstract, easy to deny. Appearances live in the eyes of the crowd, immortal, untouchable, dangerously persuasive. A single image can rewrite 1,000 truths. One moment of staged empathy can erase years of manipulation. One tear on camera can rebuild an entire reputation. Politicians who ignore this live and die by principles no one else sees. Those who understand it, they build empires on illusion. Machiavelli didn't say a leader should be heartless. He said a leader must be in control of his heart and of everyone else's. Emotion is not to be denied, but directed. The skilled politician learns to wield compassion like a sword, sharp, deliberate, and aimed at the right target. They know when to look sincere, when to look outraged, when to hold silence until it screams louder than words. Because politics is not just about decisions, it's theater. Every gesture is choreography, every word is weaponized emotion. And yet this lesson often offends the idealists. They say, shouldn't leaders be genuine? But here's the brutal truth. The masses don't want authenticity, they want security. They want a story to believe in, a savior to follow, a hand to point at when things fall apart. The genuine man who tells them the truth without filter will be crucified for it. The clever politician who feeds them half-truths wrapped in hope will be crowned as visionary. Machiavelli knew that leadership is not about being right, it's about being effective. Now, there's a quiet terror in that idea, because it means democracy itself depends not on wisdom, but on illusion. The politician who controls the narrative controls the nation. and most don't even realize they're living inside someone else's carefully written story. Every crisis is crafted, every villain is chosen, every redemption arc is staged. The people think they are choosing, but in reality, they are being guided one emotional breadcrumb at a time. That leads us to the third lesson: never rely on loyalty that isn't rooted in self-interest. Machiavelli watched how quickly allies turned into enemies once their benefit disappeared. Gratitude, he said, is a rope of sand. People will praise you, swear allegiance, even fight for you, as long as it serves them. The moment it doesn't, they'll turn. So the wise politician doesn't build loyalty through love, he builds it through leverage. Keep your allies dependent, make your rivals indebted. Ensure everyone around you needs something only you can provide, and they'll never dare to betray you. It sounds cold, but it's the architecture of survival. History is filled with fallen leaders who believed in friendship over function. They confused personal affection for political loyalty. But the state is not a family, it's a battlefield disguised as one. And the politician who forgets that becomes prey. Because the game of power doesn't stop when the cameras do. It continues in every dinner invitation, every handshake, every whispered alliance. Here's what Machiavelli meant beneath his ruthless words. Understand human nature without hating it. People are not wicked because they betray because they are human. Fear, ambition, greed, love, all of it can be used if you know where to apply pressure. The leader who moralizes about loyalty will always be devoured by those who understand it as transaction. But the leader who accepts it, shapes it, and channels it becomes unbreakable. Think of it like this: power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. It strips away the mask everyone wears until you see what drives them. The hunger, the fear, the desire to be seen. Machiavelli saw this not as cynicism, but as clarity. To govern people, you must first see them as they are, not as you wish they were. And that's why his lessons still haunt the corridors of modern politics, because they never stopped being true. Every politician walking the stage today is, knowingly or not, acting out a version of the prince. The ones who pretend not to are usually the ones most trapped by it. They preach purity while their campaigns are funded by shadows. They speak of equality while playing private games of domination. But the few who embrace the truth, who read Machiavelli not as a villain, but as a manual of power, they move differently. They don't react to chaos, they orchestrate it. They don't beg for loyalty, they manufacture it. They don't fear betrayal, they prepare for it before it comes. And here's the paradox Machiavelli would whisper to every politician today: if you want to keep power, you must learn when to be merciful and when to be merciless. The timing of virtue is everything. Show mercy too soon and you invite rebellion. Show it too late and you inherit resentment. But show it precisely when fear has reached its peak and you transform it into admiration. That's not cruelty, that's control. Because power, when stripped of pretense, is the management of fear, both yours and theirs. Machiavelli understood that fear is more reliable than love. Love depends on emotion, on constant maintenance, on the fragile approval of the masses. But fear is consistent. It binds tighter, lasts longer, and rarely questions orders. The politician who learns to inspire controlled fear, not hatred, not panic, but respect wrapped in quiet apprehension, holds the kind of power that doesn't need to shout. That's the fourth lesson. It is safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Modern leaders misinterpret. They think fear means cruelty, but that's not what Machiavelli meant. He wasn't talking about terrorizing people. He was talking about the psychology of boundaries. A ruler who is too lenient invites exploitation. A politician who tries to please everyone becomes owned by everyone. When you are loved, people feel entitled to you. When you are feared, respectfully, intelligently, they hesitate before crossing you. That hesitation is power. That pause, that calculation before betrayal, is the invisible armor that keeps a leader standing when others fall. Look at history. The adored leaders often end in tragedy. They drown in the expectations of those who once praised them. The people's love is a tide. It rises beautifully, but always recedes. Fear, when balanced with justice, builds walls that the tide can't erode. A leader who inspires respect through decisive action, through the willingness to do what others avoid, commands not affection but authority. And authority endures long after applause fades. But there's an art to it. Fear, if left unchecked, mutates into hatred, and hatred unites the weak against the strong. Machiavelli warned against this. He said a ruler must be feared in such a way that if he cannot be loved, at least he is not hated. The key is control, to punish swiftly, but only when necessary. To make every consequence feel inevitable, not personal. The wise politician doesn't lash out, he calculates. Every reprimand, every removal, every downfall of an opponent, it's not rage, it's choreography. The crowd must feel that justice, not vengeance, has been served, because that's the difference between the tyrant and the strategist. The tyrant acts from impulse, the strategist acts from necessity. One burns everything to prove his power, the other trims just enough to keep the fire alive. Machiavelli knew that the best form of fear is silent, the kind that doesn't require threats because it lives inside people's imagination. Once the image of consequence is established, words become unnecessary. People begin to govern themselves in your favor, and yet to wield fear correctly, a leader must master his own emotions first. Anger, pride, insecurity, these are weapons that turn inward. A leader who cannot rule himself will eventually destroy himself. That's the quiet truth behind all fallen empires, not external enemies, but internal chaos. Power magnifies every flaw you refuse to face. The politician who lies to the public may survive. The one who lies to himself will not. Because self-deception is the one enemy Machiavelli couldn't protect you. It erodes judgment, clouds calculation, and blinds even the most cunning strategist to the truth of his own weakness. So the fifth lesson, perhaps the hardest one, is learn to see reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. This was Machiavelli's most dangerous gift, clarity. He stripped away the comforting illusions of morality, loyalty, and love, and exposed the raw machinery of human behavior, not because he was cruel, but because he was honest. And honesty, real honesty, is the most ruthless form of intelligence. The politician who dares to see without illusion will be hated for it, but he will also be free. To see reality as it is means to understand that people are predictable in their unpredictability. They act from need, not principle. They follow strength, not virtue. They are swayed not by logic, but by emotion disguised as logic. Once you see this, manipulation becomes unnecessary. Persuasion becomes natural. You stop fighting against the current of human nature and start directing it. That's what Machiavelli meant when he said fortune favors the bold. Fortune doesn't reward risk alone. It rewards the clarity to act without illusion, the boldness to see the storm coming and use it to fill your sails instead of praying it will pass. Most politicians fail because they live in denial. They mistake optimism for strategy, hope for control. They believe the world will reward their intentions rather than their effectiveness. But the world doesn't care about intentions, it cares about results. Machiavelli would say, judge not by what they meant to do, but by what they accomplish. And that's the cruel measure of leadership. History doesn't remember who was kind, only who was effective. But effectiveness doesn't mean cruelty. It means discipline of perception, the ability to hold two truths at once, that people deserve dignity and that people are dangerous. That virtue can be genuine but also weaponized, that you can love your country while lying to its people if that lie prevents its fall. The great leaders understand this paradox and carry it like a scar, because real leadership isn't clean. It's a constant negotiation between necessity and morality, between what must be done and what should never be done. And only those who can live with that tension without breaking deserve to hold power at all. Machiavelli would look at today's world, the chaos of social media, the theater of outrage, the endless recycling of scandals, and he would laugh because none of it is new. Only the tools have changed. Human nature hasn't. The crowd still craves savior. The weak still envy the strong. The appearance of virtue still sells better than the substance of it. The politician who understands this doesn't fight the game. He plays it so masterfully that even his enemies become part of his script. Here's what most don't understand. Every accusation, every scandal, every headline is just another move on the board. The game of perception never stops, and those who panic at the noise reveal their insecurity. Machiavelli's prince would never waste energy defending himself. He would shift the frame entirely, turn the attack into proof of his importance. Make the outrage serve his story. The higher you rise, the more enemies you collect, and if you are wise, you let their hatred confirm your dominance. Because in politics, opposition is proof of relevance. Silence is death. And yet there's a strange beauty in Machiavelli's realism. Beneath the cynicism lies an odd kind of faith in human intelligence. He believed that men could be guided if they were understood, that the art of ruling was not divine but psychological. It's not about controlling through cruelty, but through comprehension. The politician who understands the hearts of men holds more power than the one who controls their weapon, because men with swords still follow the man with a story. And that's the secret thread tying all 5 lessons together. Perception, appearance, loyalty, fear, and clarity, all of them serve one purpose: control the story. The story people tell about you, the story they tell themselves about their country, their lives, their purpose. The leader who owns the story owns the future. Every reform, every law, every promise, it's all narrative architecture. You can't change reality until you first change what people believe reality to be. That's why Machiavelli's wisdom is still dangerous, because it demands you wake up from the dream that politics is about good versus evil. It's not. It's about those who see versus those who sleep. The leaders who see understand that morality without power is impotence, and power without morality is chaos. The art is in the balance, appearing moral enough to inspire trust, but never moral enough to be predictable, because predictability is vulnerability, and in the arena of power, the predictable man is already dead. So when Machiavelli said that the ends justify the means, he wasn't excusing corruption. He was diagnosing reality. The world judges you not for how you got there, but for whether you stand when others fall. And in that brutal light, the question for every politician today is simple. Are you prepared to be hated for doing what must be done? Because the path to lasting power is not paved with applause, it's paved with necessity. Power is not about having the right answers. It's about having the nerve to act when everyone else is paralyzed by doubt. The difference between the leader and the led is never intelligent. It's courage disguised as decisiveness. People don't follow the wisest, they follow the one who appears most certain. And that certainty, Machiavelli knew, is almost always an illusion, but it's an illusion that moves nations. Because men crave direction more than they crave truth. They want someone to make the chaos make sense, even if that sense is manufactured. That's why hesitation is fatal in politics. The crowd can forgive cruelty, deceit, even failure, but they will never forgive uncertainty. A moment's hesitation breeds whispers, and whispers become doubt, and doubt becomes rebellion. The leader who waits for the perfect moment will watch it pass by. Machiavelli would say, "Fortune favors the bold not because boldness is moral, but because it is movement. And in a world ruled by perception, movement is life. The still man, the overthinker, the one who tries to be perfectly fair, he's already dead." You can see it in every rise and fall of every modern empire. When times are stable, people demand kindness. When times are chaotic, they demand strength. And that's the rhythm of history. Stability breeds softness. Softness invites weakness, and weakness calls forth the ruthless. The cycle never ends because human nature never changes. Machiavelli's genius wasn't in predicting politics, it was in decoding psychology. He saw that no matter how educated or advanced society becomes, men still respond to fear, pride, and desire more than to reason. Every politician who forgets that starts to decay from within. They start believing their own myths, that the applause is real, that the loyalty is sincere, that the adoration will last. But the people who chant your name today will burn your effigy tomorrow if it serves their needs. Power is not a relationship of affection. It's an agreement of benefit. The moment that benefit disappears, the crowd looks for a new savior. And that's why Machiavelli warned that a ruler must never depend solely on the goodwill of others. Goodwill is wind, pleasant when it blows your way, destructive when it shifts. The wise ruler builds his house from stone, not sentiment. But here's the cruel irony. To maintain that illusion of goodwill, a leader must still feed it. You must let the people believe they love you, even as you govern them through fear. That's the paradox at the heart of real power. You control emotions by pretending to surrender to them. You let them think they're choosing while you guide every choice they make. You give them enemies to hate, dreams to chase, and victories to celebrate, all within boundaries you design. The best politician doesn't manipulate directly. He engineers the environment so subtly that people manipulate themselves. Think of it like a chessboard. The crowd believes they're moving freely, but the politician has already decided which pieces will matter. Each debate, each controversy, each act of outrage, all pre-scripted opportunities to reaffirm the story. The strong leader doesn't fight the people's emotions, he redirects them. Outrage becomes unity, fear becomes obedience, pride becomes loyalty. Machiavelli would call this the alchemy of politics, transforming raw emotion into control without ever appearing to force it. And yet, behind all this control lies something no one wants to admit: the loneliness of power. Because to see people as they are means you can no longer be one of them. The politician who understands manipulation can never again experience sincerity. Every smile becomes a calculation, every compliment a test. Even allies become actors whose lines you've written but whose motives you can't fully trust. The higher you climb, the thinner the air becomes, and the fewer people can breathe with you. Machiavelli lived that isolation. He tasted exile, disgrace, the silence of friends who turned away when the tides shifted. That's why his words cut so deep. They weren't theory, they were scars. He knew that true power demands detachment. You can't lead if you need to be loved. You can't command if you crave validation. The crowd smells need like blood. So the wise politician cultivates distance, not coldness, but composure. They appear approachable but remain untouchable. They let people project their hopes onto them, while never showing the full reality beneath the mask. Because once people see your humanity too clearly, they stop believing in your myth. And the myth, not the man, is what rules. So the leader must become both actor and audience, writer and role. He crafts his image not as decoration, but as armor. And every public appearance, every speech, every silence is part of that armor. Machiavelli would say, a prince must learn not only how to act, but how to seem. To seem virtuous, seem generous, seem humble, not because deception is noble, but because the world demands the illusion of nobility even when it punishes its reality. Appear good, he said, but be willing to act otherwise when necessity commands. Because necessity, not virtue, is the true law of survival. And this is where most politicians fail. They want to believe that they can play the game without getting blood on their hands. But politics, by nature, is a moral swamp. Every decision poisons something. Every gain leaves a wound. The question isn't whether you can stay clean, it's whether you can stay conscious while getting dirty. Whether you can act decisively without losing the soul that acts. Machiavelli didn't glorify cruelty, he respected the weight of it. He knew that the price of maintaining order was often paid in silence, regret, and sleepless nights. The tragedy of leadership is that the more clearly you see, the more you must sacrifice the comfort of innocence. But that's also where transformation begins. Because once you stop clinging to idealism, you begin to understand freedom, not the freedom of comfort, but the freedom of clarity. To see things as they are, to act without illusion, to move through the chaos with purpose. Machiavelli's wisdom wasn't meant to make you ruthless, it was meant to make you awake. He wanted leaders who could hold the paradox, to do what is necessary, yet still remember why it mattered. To be feared, yet still feel the weight of that fear. To lie when needed, but never forget the truth you're lying for. And perhaps that's what every modern politician has forgotten. That power isn't a trophy, it's a burden. It's the constant negotiation between who you are and who the world needs you to appear to be. The politician who believes he can remain pure will break. The one who abandons morality entirely will rot. But the one who learns to balance principle and pragmatism, illusion and action, compassion and calculation, he becomes untouchable. Not because he's perfect, but because he's real in a world addicted to pretending. Here's the final revelation that Machiavelli would whisper to those brave enough to listen. The purpose of power is not domination, it's preservation. Preservation of order, of possibility, of civilization itself. Without structure, chaos devours everything: art, thought, freedom. And someone must have the will to contain that chaos, even at the cost of their own peace. That's the hidden virtue of the Machiavellian mind, not cruelty, but courage. The courage to do what others condemn but secretly depend on. The courage to make decisions in the shadows so that others may live in the light. Every generation needs those who can bear that burden. Those who can walk through fire without flinching, who can be hated without losing direction, who can play the villain in history's eyes while quietly holding the world together. That is the highest form of power, not to be adored, but to be necessary. Machiavelli understood that. He wrote not for the masses, but for the few who could handle truth without collapsing. His lessons weren't meant to make tyrants, they were meant to forge realists, the kind who see clearly, act decisively, and endure silently. And that's where the story turns inward, because this isn't just about politicians. Every person who seeks influence, every individual who wants to shape their destiny, stands before the same mirror. The same choice between illusion and clarity, comfort and truth, moral appearance and moral effectiveness. We are all, in our own way, princes of our little domains, our families, careers, reputation. And Machiavelli's voice still echoes. Will you act, or will you wait to be acted upon? Because at the end of it all, power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. It reveals the difference between those who perform virtue and those who wield it, between those who need to be liked and those who need to make things happen, between those who worship appearances and those who command them. And maybe that's the real lesson every politician and every human must learn, that the world will always test what you claim to value. And when it does, words won't save you, only strategy will. So what happens when a politician truly understands Machiavelli? When the masks are no longer costumes but instruments, when the illusions are not lies but architect, what happens when someone stops trying to appear good and instead learns to use goodness like a language, fluent and deliberate? That's when they stop playing politics and start conducting it. You can feel the difference in their presence. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's calm, unnervingly calm. The kind of calm that comes from someone who already knows where this is going. They don't waste energy defending themselves, explaining, or reacting. They know perception is a currency, and silence, when used correctly, is the most expensive form of speech. Every movement, every word, every pause orchestrated with surgical intent. They understand that the point of power isn't to control everything, it's to make everything move toward you naturally. That's the hidden genius of Machiavelli's lessons. They aren't instructions on manipulation, they're about alignment. Aligning human nature with your purpose. Aligning chaos with order. Aligning what people want to believe with what you need them to do. The great politician doesn't fight against human weakness, he integrates it into his design. He turns greed into motivation, vanity into loyalty, fear into obedience, and hope into fuel. He doesn't demand that people become better. He uses them as they are to create something greater than any one of them could on their own. That's the irony most critics never understood. Machiavelli was anti-human. He was hyperhuman. He looked at men not with disdain, but with clinical compassion. He saw that they are flawed, frightened, and fickle, but still capable of greatness when properly guided. The problem is that most leaders want admiration without comprehension. They want to be loved by people they never bothered to understand. Machiavelli would tell them, "You cannot lead those you idealize. You must see their darkness if you wish to bring out their light." He would tell today's politicians, "Stop pretending you are above the game. You are in it whether you like it or not." Every smile, every headline, every decision is part of the theater. The question isn't whether you're performing, it's whether you wrote the script. And if you didn't, someone else did, and you're already a character in their story. That's why every effective leader, from Caesar to Churchill to modern strategists who speak softly but shift continents, has a piece of Machiavelli's soul in them. The ability to separate how things should be from how they are. The courage to act in that gap, that narrow, brutal, necessary space where reality lives. Because the higher truth is this: civilization itself depends on that gap, on someone's willingness to do what others can't stomach but desperately need. But here's the tragedy buried inside the triumph. The more a leader understands this, the more alien they become to the very people they protect. The crowd loves the idea of strength, but despises the cost of it. They want safety, but not the decisions that make safety possible. They want a leader who bleeds for them, but never bleeds on them. And when that leader finally does what must be done, the same crowd that once praised him will curse his name to keep their innocence intact. That's the curse of the Machiavellian, to be right too early, to be necessary but never loved. Still, the wise one endures, because they know legacy isn't written by the living, it's written by time, and time has a way of peeling back hypocrisy to reveal the architecture beneath. The same crowd that condemns the realist today will thank him tomorrow when they realize he built the world that lets them sleep at night. That's what Machiavelli meant when he said it is better to be feared than loved, not because love is weak, but because fear endures long enough for love to be understood. And yet, there's a deeper current flowing beneath all of this, something almost spiritual. Machiavelli's work, if you strip away the politics, is really about awakening, about seeing through illusion, about learning to act consciously in a world driven by unconscious impulses. Most people are sleepwalking through their lives, reacting to stories they didn't write, ruled by emotions they didn't choose. The Machiavellian mind wakes up inside that dream. It stops reacting and starts directing. It stops hoping for fairness and starts building systems that make fairness irrelevant. It stops asking for permission and starts taking responsibility for the consequences of power. That's why his ideas still feel dangerous, because they strip away the excuses. They leave you alone with the truth that no one is coming to save you, not the state, not morality, not destiny. The only thing that stands between you and chaos is your ability to think clearly, act strategically, and endure discomfort without breaking. That's the real Machiavellian lesson, not how to control others, but how to master yourself in a world that's constantly trying to pull you apart. Self-control, perception, timing, clarity. These aren't tricks, they're discipline. And when practiced long enough, they transform not just politicians, but people. They create individuals who can stand still in the middle of a storm without losing focus, who can face betrayal without falling apart, who can lead even when no one believes in them. Because leadership, in the end, isn't about position, it's about posture. The posture of someone who doesn't need external validation to keep moving. The posture of someone who can hold the burden of understanding and still keep acting. That's what separates rulers from dreamers. Dreamers want to be understood. Rulers want to understand. Dreamers chase ideals. Rulers shape reality. Dreamers hope the world will change. Rulers use the world as it is to create what could be. And though history loves the dreamers for their poetry, it survives because of the rulers who had the will to turn that poetry into structure. That's what Machiavelli respected most, not kindness, not purity, but effectiveness. Because effectiveness is mercy disguised as ruthlessness. It is the only force that keeps chaos from consuming everything. So maybe the question is whether Machiavelli was right. Maybe the question is whether we're brave enough to admit that he was. Brave enough to see politics for what it truly is. The management of human weakness in service of collective stability. Brave enough to understand that power doesn't make people bad, it simply magnifies what was already there. Brave enough to realize that the only thing more dangerous than a cunning leader is a naive one. And maybe that's the final paradox, that Machiavelli, the man accused of teaching manipulation, might have been the only one honest enough to tell humanity the truth. That power will never belong to the virtuous alone, and that pretending otherwise only ensures it falls into the wrong hands. Because when the good refuse to learn strategy, the wicked inherit the game. And every time that happens, the world burns a little more. So what should every politician learn today? Not just Machiavelli's lessons, but his gaze, that cold, lucid, compassionate gaze that sees humanity clearly but refuses to despair. To understand that power, when guided by intelligence, can still serve virtue. That deception, when aimed at protection, can still be moral. That strategy, when anchored in purpose, can still be noble. The Machiavellian way is not the path of darkness. It's the path through it, the refusal to flinch when faced with what must be done. In the end, every politician will face the same mirror Machiavelli did. And that mirror will ask one question: will you lead or will you pretend? Will you shape perception, or will perception shape you? Will you act from necessity, or hide behind ideals until someone stronger writes your story for you? Because history doesn't remember those who meant well. It remembers those who understood the game well enough to change its rules. That's the ultimate lesson, the one hidden beneath every line of The Prince. Power is not evil, it's a tool, a mirror, a force that reveals who you are beneath all your masks. It asks again and again, what will you do when no one's watching? What will you sacrifice to preserve what matters? And can you bear the loneliness of clarity in a world addicted to illusion? Machiavelli's whisper still echoes through the corridors of power, through parliaments, palaces, and boardrooms. A whisper not of cruelty, but of challenge. See clearly, act decisively, endure silently. Because in the end, when the applause fades and the cameras turn away, the only truth that matters is whether you still stand. Whether your mind remained sharp when others lost theirs. Whether you built something that outlived the noise. And when that moment comes, when history strips away the masks and weighs the results, the question will not be whether you were loved. It will be whether you endured. And that is the final lesson Machiavelli ever meant to teach.